Hello everyone, welcome to Bright by Bytes channel. This is Vijay. Today we are going to see some of the best practices while deploying production application in Kubernetes, addressing key areas such as high availability, security, resiliency, and other best practices. I have identified some of the important Kubernetes features that helps the production application deployment to be highly available, secure, and efficient. Without further delay, let's get to it. I have here a sample application deployment Kubernetes spec, which I will be using today to walk you guys through best practices to follow while deploying production application in Kubernetes. Number one, always externalize application configurations credentials using config maps and secrets. So whenever you this is typical production scenario. You may have your credentials that you wanted to externalize from your application. You don't want to um, rebuild your application container if there is a change in your credentials. So you want to externalize your application as much as possible. So typical production workloads would involve storing some credentials. Kubernetes allows that using secrets. So always store your credentials through the Kubernetes secrets through key value pair. As you can see in this example, have stored the DB username and password in the secret. These are base64 encoded. Keep in mind, this is not encrypted. It is just base64 encoded. It provides a little bit of security, but not the best security that you would expect. But Kubernetes at least provides this option, so why not use it? So you would store these credentials that your application would need in the key value pair. Sometimes you might also need some environment variables that you wanted to store as a file. So you could also do that. For example, in this case, I have a .env file containing a list of key value pairs, which I could store it as a file as well. So Kubernetes allows storing those list of content in a file format as well, so that you could load those data into the Docker container or into your application container. So Kubernetes allows that. So specifying secret allows you to externalize your application credentials, which is really important. This is one of the best practices that I would recommend. Even better, if you have any sort of vault configurations or any key store instances like vault or any other credential storage instances, I would recommend storing these credentials over there and pulling them dynamically into your container at runtime when you're deploying your application. So if you do not have such option, then go for Kubernetes secrets. The next one is config map. So there are some non-sensitive information or application configuration that you would want to externalize as well. You don't want to restart your application or rebuild your application every time a configuration changes. So Kubernetes config map allows you to externalize your application configuration with that are non-sensitive into config map. So you could store key value pair information like you can see here. I have a cluster region and I have an app version which is all non-sensitive information which I have configured as a config map. You can also store your non-sensitive information that you have as a file into config map as well. Example, a lot of Spring Boot application, they load their application configuration from app.properties file or any .properties file. So you could store those information as a file as well. Just like secrets, you could store your entire file into config map and you can use them in your application. So these are some of the common patterns that you would come across when deploying your application in production. Here's one example where I have the app.properties file and I have user.properties file which contains some bunch of key value information, and I have a straightforward key value information as well, which I have stored it in a config map. We will later see how we're going to use this and how are we going to deploy them. Next, in a typical production deployment, you would also come across scenario where you have to load your enterprise certificates into the container in order to securely access other endpoints as well. So in that case, you have to load your company's certificates into the Kubernetes container. So in that case, you can store your certificate information as well in a config map or as a secret by loading the entire file in this way and then adding them into the container file system. So Kubernetes allows doing that. Number two is setting replicas of more than one instances. So this um, specifically addresses high availability. So this straight away makes your application highly available. So through the deployment, through the Kubernetes deployment, it allows you to specify some desired state for your application. In this case, the desired state that you're specifying for your application is I want 3 instances of my application to be running all the time. So this is the desired state that you're setting, which makes your application highly available. Kubernetes takes this as an input and makes sure at any given point of time you have 3 instances of your application all the time running. So this provides a way to make your application highly available. Next, let's look at the security context. So this addresses your security area. The reason I say this addresses your security area is you would have come across a lot of time experts saying never run your application as root. So this security context does exactly the same. So by specifying run as user, run as group, and file system group, you are not going to run your application as root here. So your container process would be running as a non-root user. So this is highly recommended by experts, and I also recommend that you would follow when you're deploying your application in production into Kubernetes. Always make sure your spec contains the security context that you are not running your application as root. So make sure you set the security context in your deployment so that it is secure. So the reason I say why you shouldn't run your application as root is root provides access to your host system where this container would be running. So by providing access, root access to the host system where this container would be running, it opens up a lot of vulnerabilities that could be manipulated and make your network and system vulnerable to many attacks. So that's why always uh, deploy your workloads as a non-root user. So this security context allows you to do that. The next important best practices that I wanted to recommend is setting up pod anti-affinity. This comes under the high availability area. So what is pod anti-affinity? Pod anti-affinity lets you spread your workloads across multiple different worker nodes. So although Kubernetes spreads your workloads in the most efficient way, it doesn't guarantee you that your instances would go and sit on different worker nodes. So there could be an instance, let's say you have, in this case, there is 3 replicas. Let's say I have not set up pod anti-affinity. What Kubernetes might do is if it doesn't find enough resources on specific workloads or specific worker nodes, it might go and schedule the same it might go and schedule 2 or more instances on a single worker node. So you do not want to have that scenario. You want to spread your workloads across multiple different worker nodes so that when one worker node goes down, you have your pods running on different worker nodes that are up and running and serving traffic. So now making sure you set your pod anti-affinity allows you to spread your pods across multiple different worker nodes so that even if one worker node goes down, you have pods running on various other worker nodes that can handle traffic. So this is another feature that is highly recommended that make sure your application is highly available as well. So the way you would do it is by setting this pod anti-affinity as you can see in this example spec. Next, Next comes the image pull policy. So I've categorized this under security. The reason I categorize this under security is a lot of times I've seen spec that doesn't contain image pull policy. So what it does is when you do not have that, so what Kubernetes would do is it would look for your image if it exists on the host worker node. If the image is already cached in your worker node, it would start using that image automatically and which allows for vulnerability. The reason I say vulnerability is there could be another application, another intruder or an attacker who has access to your system could easily use your image without having to download it from an external system. So if it is already cached in the worker node, another team or another intruder can make use of your application and deploy it and manipulate it. So you do not want to do that. You want to keep your image secure and always pull from an external system. So always I would recommend setting this image pull policy to always, so that your image is not cached in the worker node. It is always pulled from the external system each and every time your deployment goes through. Next, I would recommend graceful shutdown, which will minimize request failures. So, what is graceful shutdown? So, let's talk a little more about graceful shutdown. Consider a scenario where a pod gets killed for various reasons. So, let's say there are few transactions in flight. At this point of time, when Kubernetes receives the signal to kill the pod, it could be a manual kill or it could be for various reasons. So Kubernetes would instantly kill the pod. But what happens to the traffic that's in flight? So there could be some incoming traffic as well. So it takes a while for Kubernetes to update the IP tables of the services that are serving traffic, that are load balancing primitively to send traffic to the pods to update the IP table. So when things are in flight, there are chances when the pod gets killed, those requests would end up having connection refused error. So we do not want to have such scenario where there are few transactions in flight and there are new incoming requests which needs to be stopped from further going into the killed pod. So how can we address that? There are certain applications which handle this internally within the application. For example, Nginx has its own exit command that you could use that would gracefully shut down, serving all the in-flight transactions and shutting down any new request. And there are some commands in RabbitMQ which would gracefully handle in-flight request, and it would also stop any new incoming request as well. So if you do not have such features for your application, what I would recommend is setting this lifecycle pre-stop, which is a command that you could put in that would allow the container to have some sleep time so that it could finish up those in-flight transactions. For example, let's say your application would take 5 seconds to process any set of requests at any given time, then you can put in 5 seconds. If your application needs 10 seconds to process any request set of requests that it has received, then put in 10 seconds. So it's up to you. So whatever makes sense for your application, um, go for it. So I wouldn't recommend 5 seconds for each and every application. It's not a hard set number. It depends on application to application. So whatever time your application would take when it is killed to um, finish up the in-flight transactions, I would recommend setting that number. So what this lifecycle pre-stop command does is when Kubernetes sends the kill command, it doesn't straight away kill your pod. It would wait for 5 seconds so to finish up and then kill the pod. So this would allow any in-flight request to be serviced before the pod going into killed mode. So I would recommend setting this lifecycle command to gracefully shut down so that you can minimize request failures. Next, setting up request and limits. Why do we need to set request and limits? I've seen a lot of spec having just the request, and I've seen a lot of spec that doesn't contain request and limits at all. I would recommend setting request and limit. So setting request and limits allows to use compute resources efficiently. So you do not want to waste resources, especially when you're deploying into AWS or GKE, or for that matter on any on-prem Kubernetes. You do not want to waste your resources. You want to use your compute resources efficiently. So I would recommend setting your request and the limits by specifying the memory and the CPU value. So you could arrive at the request and the limits by doing some stress testing in your non-production environment, how much your application is capable to handle. So I would recommend ideally your request should be your minimum or guaranteed resource allocated to the container. To set this, stress test in sending expected traffic in production. So ideally, this allocation should be able to handle your average traffic expected by your application. So any average traffic that your application is expected to handle, you would go for that value and set it as your request. Limits are accounting for any spike in traffic. So let's say your application sometimes gets some unexpected spike in traffic. So you want to account for those spike in traffic as well. So limits are those that sporadic spike that you might get for your application. You would go set those values for the upper limit or the higher limit, the max your application resource that your container can use. So you would go for those. So I would recommend these are some of the best practices, especially with in terms of configuring resources to use your resources efficiently, configure the request and the limits. Next, liveness and readiness probe. This is another high availability and resiliency area. It comes under high availability and resiliency area. Um, Liveness probe. So liveness probe um, is constantly checking whether your application is up and running or not. So by specifying your liveness probe, Kubernetes automatically checks whether your application is up and running at any given point of time. If your application is down, it automatically restarts your container automatically for you. So you don't have to do anything. Liveness probe takes care of it for you. So it can come back up if it encountered some issue. It could be some failure in your application which you would normally manually go and restart. You don't have to do that. By setting the liveness probe, Kubernetes automatically takes care of restarting your application. Many times you would have seen a lot of issues get resolved when you restart your application. So you don't have to do that manually. Liveness probe allows Kubernetes to take care of that for you. So I would recommend doing that. Readiness probe is something which is slightly different from the liveness probe. Um, Here, Kubernetes would take a particular pod out of the traffic if it is not ready. So, this readiness probe is what determines whether this particular pod should be participating in accepting traffic or should it be out of traffic. So, readiness probe is something that Kubernetes checks. So, you could specify what you need to check for. So, it's slightly different, right? So, there could be scenario where your application would start up, but it may take like maybe 10 or 15 seconds for it to be fully up and ready to accept traffic. So in that scenario, your readiness probe comes into picture and it becomes really handy, so that you can determine when this particular pod is ready to accept traffic. So there's huge difference between application starting and when an application is ready to accept traffic. So you need to pay attention. A lot of legacy apps start up, but it takes 10 or 15 minutes for the application itself to be fully up and ready to receive traffic. So in that case, your readiness probe should check for that scenario where your application is ready to accept traffic, and then that pod would be added to receive traffic. So this readiness probe allows you to do that. I highly recommend setting this liveness probe and readiness probe. I'm stressing it again. A lot of teams I've seen wouldn't set this liveness probe and readiness probe. So um, my recommendation is go and set this liveness probe and readiness probe if you have not set already. There are some of the topics that I covered so far. We have those topics covered in detail in our YouTube channel, Bright by Bytes, which you can very well take a look. I have put those links in our description. You can go check it out in detail if you want to understand more about liveness probe, readiness probe, or pod anti-affinity. We have detailed sessions covering those topics as well. Next comes um, the time zone. So this is one efficient feature that I would recommend folks to set as well. So for the purpose of this particular environment variable that we set is the log that you write to standard out, standard error. most of the time the timestamps are in mostly the UTC time or the timestamp of the underlying host or the worker node. For example, if you want those time zone to reflect the time zone that you would want your preferred time zone to be in, then I would recommend setting this environment variable TC for time zone and set your preferred time zone that you want those pod logs to be. So setting this would have your pod logs printed in your preferred time zone. Have this other section commented out, which is another feature that would be really helpful when you're in a very closed environment, when your Kubernetes cluster is in a restrictive environment, or if you are on a private network and trying to connect to an endpoint that is outside of the network, like you have a private network where your Kubernetes is running. It could be an on-prem or it could be on a cloud, which is basically a restrictive environment. But if your application wants to talk to another endpoint which has to connect to an internet, and you not have a direct option where you have to go through the proxy, so you could set those proxy information as an environment variable for Kubernetes to route those traffic, outbound traffic, through those proxies. So if your application is making a call to another external application system which requires going through and connecting through an internet, and if your environment is a restricted environment and you want to use your proxy, you could do that by setting these environment variables: HTTP proxy, HTTPS proxy, and no proxy. The no proxy is for communicating with anything internal to your system, internal to your network, and the HTTP proxy and the HTTPS proxy are for connecting to an external system. So I highly recommend taking a look if your production workloads involves going through proxy to connect to an internet or to an external endpoint. So there are different ways to set environment variables. Like there will be straightforward this straightforward key value pair that you could set by referencing the config map example. The app version and the cluster information, these are key value information coming directly from the config map. Straightforward, where you specify the config map name, the name of the config map that we specified at the top, and you would set those, give those config map reference name and the key that was specified there. And if you want to load those file that we saw, for example, we had a combination of key value pair as well as a file content as well. A lot of times, this is common pattern that you would see in production deployments. So you would see a mix of key value information as well as whole content of the file. For example, the certificate is a file that you need to load it into the container file system. So your environment variable could be set, or you could set load a file into the container file system. So you could do that using the volume mount, where you can specify the mount path where you want to load your file. So these volume mounts lets you do that. So either your config map and secrets could be used to set your environment variables, like a key value pair information, like you can see here, directly put in your config map key reference or the secret key reference and specify your key so that it could be set as an environment variable. Or if you want to load the entire file, for example here the .env file or the certificate file into the container file system, then you would specify the volume mount and provide the mount path, and specify the file system where you want to load the file itself. So you could do that through the volume mount, or you could set key value information through the environment variable by specifying the config map key reference and the secret key reference. So these are common patterns that you would come across when deploying application production workloads in Kubernetes. Um, I have this commented out. So there are enterprises where you have your Docker image stored in a private registry which requires authentication. So the way you would authenticate against the registry is to specify the image pull secret which is again a secret that you would create containing the credentials of the private Docker registry that is hosting your Docker image. So uncomment this if you are using some private registry which requires authentication. Uncomment this and create your Kubernetes secret containing the credential of that registry so that Kubernetes can pull those images from that private registry. Here again, you have the services. Um, Here I've commented out the load balancer type. So if you're running Kubernetes on a public cloud that supports load balancer type, then I would recommend enabling this. But if you are on an environment where you do not have the load balancer type support, um, but you do have some sort of an ingress like Traffic or Nginx, then I would recommend um, enabling the ingress. So if your organization supports load balancer type, you may not need the ingress. You can comment out this part and just use the service alone. But if your organization doesn't support load balancer, you may end up using ingress for the traffic to be routed to the service and onto the pods. You may come across Traffic and Nginx or some of the ingress controllers which you may use. So accordingly, use the ingress. The important part in ingress, I would say, is whatever the ingress controller you're using. If you're using Traffic, make sure this ingress class is specified accordingly. If you're using Nginx, make sure whatever the ingress controller name is, class name is, specify that in this annotation so that your traffic routing is properly working. Yeah. All right. The final thing that I wanted to recommend is setting pod disruption budget. A very important feature which comes under high availability. Um, let's talk a little bit of pod disruption budget. We have this topic covered in our YouTube channel, Bri by Bytes, in detail. So if you're interested, you can check out our description, which contains the full detailed description of this topic. Let me give you a quick overview of what this does. Pod disruption budget is a scenario where, let's say, the Kubernetes cluster, the admins or your Kubernetes cluster admin goes through the maintenance schedule. It could be an upgrading the Kubernetes cluster. It could be some sort of a maintenance where the worker nodes are taken down during maintenance. In that scenario, your pods should be resilient enough to handle your traffic. So there could be scenario where let's say we are running three instances of three pods for this application. At any given point of time, your application should be able to handle 75% of a traffic, let's say. So by running through the upgrade, let's say Kubernetes takes down two of your pods. We do not one single pod cannot handle 75% of your requests. You do not want to end up in such scenario. So pod disruption budget comes in handy here, where you can specify what is the maximum unavailable or maximum available. So you can set either one, maximum unavailable or maximum available. So here I have set maximum unavailable. In my scenario, I put in a percentage, which is what I would recommend. You could set up a number as well. You could set maximum unavailable is 1, which means out of three parts, only one could be unavailable at any given time when a scheduled maintenance is going on. I would recommend setting percentage because that way you don't have to think about whenever you scale your number of parts, you don't have to come and change this value. So setting a percentage would automatically take care when you're scaling up your application to 10 instances or maybe 20 instances. You don't have to come and change the hard coded number. Rather, specifying the percentage would address the scenario. So setting this max unavailable to 33%. In my case, I have three pods. So at any given time, I'm saying only take down one pod. So when your worker nodes are going through the maintenance, um, Kubernetes would honor this particular configuration that Kubernetes allows, pod disruption budget. If you have set it for your production workloads, it would only take down only one pod. So rest of the worker node, the maintenance would stop until you have two pods that are available. So I highly recommend setting this setting so that you have your two pods or the most number of pods running all the time in order to service your traffic. So yeah. So I think we have come to the end of this session here. So I've covered most of the important practices, commonly used patterns that we come across while deploying production application in Kubernetes. I've shared the link of this particular sample deployment spec as well in the description. Do go over, and if you want to add something or comment, or if you feel anything is amiss, do let us know, or you could contribute to this project as well. I would highly recommend doing that as well. Um, yeah, so that's it. Do subscribe to our channel, Bri by Bytes. We have a lot more interesting topics coming your way. So, yeah, stay in touch. Thank you.